All right, with that, we'll move to the west side then of the, which is this is the first drawing, as you can kind of see. We're working out, right now, this is very conceptual. It's, we're putting a few different ideas on this drawing. But first and foremost, what we want to address is I'm going to kind of go out of order a little bit, but is the flood mitigation. It is an important aspect. Obviously, you know that when rains come like they did last weekend, the field does get kind of like a trampoline or a waterbed effect. And we want to mitigate that if we're going to be replacing the synthetic turf, which is now due to become replaced due to all the wear and tear of the flooding and the age of it. So we want to first and foremost do that. Before I explain the rest of that, I want to have Jason talk a little bit about what flood mitigation would mean in that area, if that's appropriate, or would you like me to talk about the rest of the plan first? Dr.
Go ahead, Jason.
I guess, first of all, I just want to start off by, I don't think that we're going to guarantee that there's never going to be a flood again. If the river overtops and it starts coming back and it's overtopping Gulf Road and you know, it's that to that degree. But I think that what we're looking for is the recent rainfall events, you know, the 1-inch rainfalls that kind of, you know, aren't as bad as like a 100-year storm or something, but they can still wreak havoc with, you know, flooding, floating the turf, which is a big problem for Joel, I'm sure, to, you know, re-spread and maintain the infill.
Can I add something on that?
Please.
I think the first time it really flooded, what you're describing actually happened. So in the back of your mind, when you're doing this work, what's the possibility of putting a berm around Gulf Road or whatever, that field to protect it?
So a dam that goes
Something
around
to
the
that
whole
effect,
perimeter.
because the river actually came over and was flowing over Gulf Road.
Right.
So,
We had 4 or 5 rains this summer, Joel. I think the worst I would say was last weekend probably.
Yeah, correct.
Where we got the most in a short period of time.
Correct.
But our field rose
Yeah, and about
3 or 4
about
times
3 or
this
4
summer.
times this year, and
Just
and
the last facilities committee meeting we had, which was June 27th, we had about 35 minutes of a powerful storm, and the turf was rising. So,
yeah, that's typically it. It's the heavy downpour in a short amount of time. Anytime we get that, we seem to, you know, we end up with, we lose a lot of fibers out of the synthetic turf, and you know, they wash out onto the track. Some may have seen that when that happens, but it deteriorates the surface of the field.
To a greater extent, it can actually, as that turf floats, it can rip from the nailer boards that go around the perimeter. On the edge of the track, it could pull away in extreme cases where the water floats so badly. The existing field, because it's MWRD rules, the field has to have infiltration. So what the field does right now is it allows some water to sit in it underneath in the gravel, and that promotes water to infiltrate back into the ground, which is a requirement of theirs. In order to get that water out of the field, we feel that, and we've done several of these, that we should pump the water, rather than allow the water to sit under the field and infiltrate into the ground. We should forcibly pump the water out of there to another area that can be sacrificially an infiltration trench buried beneath the ground surface. So a big hole in the ground with a bunch of gravel placed back into it, and that's where we would pump the water from the field into. And that area it would allow us to keep the underlying gravel of the field dry as we pump the water out of there forcibly into this sacrificial area where the water can infiltrate. And from that point, if the water can't infiltrate quickly enough into the ground, it can bubble up through an overflow structure and flow overland to another storm sewer.
Where do you plan to put another? I heard that before, but I don't see that in your drawings.
Right. It's
Well, we wouldn't at this point be designing that, that's not.
Okay, but, we're trying to educate the
Mhm.
board and here, and one of our problems, we know we're landlocked, so
Right.
we don't want the neighbors to think we plan to pump it in their front
Right.
yards or
No.
something, okay?
If you could scroll up a little bit.
Yeah, just a hair, thank you. Just a little bit more. I want to see at the bottom corner, actually, the other way, sorry. Yeah, no problem, that's great, thank you. This is a very logical spot at the southeast corner here. This kind of pie shape. That's where the overflow occurs at this present time. That's why there's that low spot in that area. There's two rims. One of those rims lets water under its own, when it seeks its level, come up, bubble up, percolate up through the rim, go over land, and then re-enter the other structure that's over there. So that's how the existing condition is, the existing design is meeting the requirements of the overland flow.
But again, that's tentative at this point.
Right.
We
Right.
need to get into the design of it. It would just be, and this is, again, below ground, nothing that anyone would ever see.
Right. If anything, we could have the ground here could be more flush than it is today. Instead of having the low spot that's a couple feet lower than the surrounding area, with the pump situation or scenario, it could be flush. It could be a constant grade from the track to Gulf, allowing us more opportunity to berm and to separate the surface waters from flowing back.
How deep would the gravel be in that spot? I mean,
Probably 8 feet, plus or minus 6.
I mean, does that volume really make sense? Because you're talking about the volume of the entire field, basically, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
and you're pumping it into that little spot.
Yes.
It doesn't quite make sense that it would work.
With that depth and, that's about the size that we've done. We've done Argo Community High School, same thing. We've done other ones, man, I'm trying to think of the ones nearest here, but probably Argo's the closest. But that's, as a percentage of the field area, if you're going 6-8 feet deep, that, you can get quite a bit of volume there that promotes infiltration.
Is there a possibility of digging deeper under the entire turf to add more gravel for more water collection?
Yes, that's more similar to the existing design, and the problem then is you can't forcibly pump the water out of that, because the infiltration you can't take the water out of the infiltration by pump, because it has to have time to infiltrate into the ground. So doing like you say would mean that we'd have water potentially sitting underneath the field for long periods of time.
Trying to make its way to the pump, or
Right.
to the, okay.
Right. So, and also the area under the field is much shallower than what this pit would be as well. So you get the benefit of that as well.
Would you put drain tiles under the field
Yes.
and then collect somewhere to some choke point or whatever, and then you'd
And that's
pump
what would
it?
get pumped from the under drain. And that's the whole reason that the infiltration is required, is because of the under drains, the perforated pipes is really what requires that. It's a long story to get into it if you want to, but
It's like a sump pump in your house. It's basically the same idea.
Yeah, bigger scale.
Do we, while Jason, while you're up, do you want to talk about drainage or flood mitigation in regards to the tennis courts or parking lot? We haven't made a decision on that yet. That's why we have the boxes inside the parking lot. So would there need to be any additional drainage or flood mitigation put in there, considering that's already established?
Right. Mainly, it shouldn't be required. Basically, it's, unless we're gonna propose more under drains, more perforated pipes beneath for groundwater dewatering, those kinds of applications. So it's potential that there may be the storm sewer in Gulf actually flows north and then flows west down Rockefeller. So a very logical spot to connect the storm piping would be at this location.
Is that where it's connected, you think, already?
The field connects here now, just at the southeast corner, and then other things connect in the middle, and then eventually it all flows to this point. So that's why the southeast corner was a logical spot, in my opinion, to connect, to put the infiltration. We could allow the same drainage pattern. We'd be matching the same drainage pattern, but connecting at the northwest corner wouldn't be a bad idea either, because we would relieve the storm sewer from this point to this point of some of the load that it is currently carrying. So would be a benefit to the existing storm sewer. And whatever we can remove from this stretch reduces the demand on that pipe, which could in effect reduce the the tailwater effect on the upstream pipes of that. So there's a slight benefit to that. I wouldn't call it, we're not going to fix all the drainage problems in the area, but there's an improvement rather than a worsening effect.
What's your knowledge or experience in the past with dealing with MWRD in the event if you pave over, I believe it's an impervious spot right now, our current shot and discus, our practice field over there, the district's practice field, that's
This one?
That's considered impervious, correct? Is this
Pervious.
It's
Pervious.
And if we were, I don't know, we haven't made a decision again, and we have to go through all this, but in the event that we wanted to try to find a way to add parking and keep the tennis courts on site, is that even something that MWRD would let us do by moving the tennis courts more into the field?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that something that would cause, we'd have to do significant amount of water retention?
So pushing the tennis courts more into this area
Yeah.
and proposing parking as shown to some degree there, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Because of this area, it's a combined sewer area, we do not have to provide detention for impervious areas for the MWRD. However, state law, we can't, and we don't want to, increase runoff to downstream properties. So what we would do is we would make sure that we withhold enough water and slow it down to the point similar to a detention scenario most people are familiar with. We would slow it to the point where we actually decrease the flow that goes off-site, no matter what we're doing.
That's been one big concern from the community, is that if there's anything paved over the grass area, that would cause additional flooding for some of the residents. So I know that's a question the board will eventually want to answer as we move through this process.
Sure.
What about something like permeable pavers and those types of things? Are those also reasonable solutions in the event you did both?
Yeah, the MWRD just started recognizing permeable pavers and the benefits that they provide. We're actually seeking a permit under the previous MWRD ordinance, because we put this project on the list, the grandfather list, so that we could proceed with the project under the previous ordinance. That ordinance does not recognize permeable pavers and the benefits. It's still a possibility to do. We know that they know now that it is a benefit, and I think most people do realize that, but we wouldn't get benefit or compensation from the MWRD for doing that in that scenario.
John, Tim, any other follow-up questions?
What, watch it.
On the, let's see, that's gonna be the northwest corner. Where does it go from there, the storm sewer?
It goes up, goes north from up that street. I don't know if that's Rockefeller.
And
Is that the continuation of Rockefeller?
Well, Rockefeller's is the,
Yeah, it's this one.
Right by the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, up to the cul-de-sac and it goes north.
Into the zoo? It goes into the zoo then?
Right. I don't know if we have a topo on the survey up there. Probably not. I'll just grab it real quick.
Is there a choke point there that's sort of stopping the outflow? Or is that sewer big enough? Like the sewer under Gulf Road and Rockefeller?
Yeah, that's, that doesn't, what you're thinking restricted?
Yes.
No, it is 23. You got a 12-inch sewer that comes up Gulf, and it changes a little bit from manhole to manhole, but it's 12-inch, and then it's 15-inch going down to Rockefeller. So 12-inch here, 15-inch here, and then at the far west end of Rockefeller, it is, oh, still 15. So it's 15 through the entire length of Rockefeller before it turns north.
Are we getting outflow from the zoo, from the north that's feeding into that?
Okay. We haven't done a whole overall network. May I ask why you're asking?
Well, because the zoo could be contributing to the flooding.
Okay, yeah. You don't know that that's the case, but you're,
Well, I'm asking because the whole thing is if it gets backed up, it doesn't matter what you do with this retention pond or whatever, it's gonna back up onto the field again.
Mhm.
So there's an outflow problem, or if the zoo's contributing to it, we have to make sure that whatever we have in that massive storm is going to exit.
I'm
You're the
sure-
expert on this, believe
Yeah.
me, I'm not an expert, I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had some history, but I'm sure that they're draining to those pipes as well. So I know that there is some, some effect from them draining to those pipes.
Do you think right now that there is a problem with the capacity that's contributing to the flooding of the field?
The 12 and the 15-inch pipes?
There is.
That's small. It's small for this type of tributary area, and it's not just stormwater pipes. It's combined. It's both sanitary and sewer together. So it's the demand, the flow is much greater.
But those decisions on the 12 and 15-inch pipes or so, that's not our.
Right. That's the municipality.
Right.
But John's point is, if we spend $1 million doing drainage and the sewer pipes are too small, it's still gonna back up. Right?
Right.
Isn't it true?
Yes, that's
And
true.
unless you had some way of completely storing all the runoff during a storm from our footprint somewhere else until the sewers are back down to their norm, right?
But we do have the 1-2 punch of providing some volume, enough to make sure that we're not increasing the discharge rate
Right.
off-site. And also the pumps force the water out of the most sensitive areas, like locker rooms, turf field, into another area where that volume can be provided and slowly released. So we can improve it for sure.
Okay. And who else do we have to get permitting from for this? Not just the stormwater, is it just Brookfield and MWRD?
And the Regional Office of Education.
And
Potentially the east side of Gulf, Riverside.
Right.
If we're doing things further to the north, perhaps the county, Cook County,
Okay.
in certain areas.
Carrie, do you want to go over some of the other things you have highlighted here?
Sure. So the rest of the improvements that are kind of illustrated here really relate to the stadium. And first and foremost, the replacement of the concrete bleacher structure, which is, I think everyone understands, is in need of attention with the spalling concrete. And so we're going to replace that with an aluminum bleacher. At least that is the intention at this point. Again, this is just a conceptual drawing. Also replacing the visitor side bleachers. We're still in discussions about exactly the amount for each, the capacity for each, but right now, this is illustrating a 2,000 capacity on the home side and a 500 capacity bleacher on the visitor side. Then in addition to that, we are investigating the possibility of adding a 7th lane to the existing track structure. If in fact we were to embark upon that, it would be recommended that we would redo the entire track structure and the sub-base in order to create, not create any differential movement between the two, and our civil engineer has acknowledged that that is in fact the way that we would like to go. So that is one option that we're looking at. If we do embark upon that, we become very close to these buildings, but it does provide a lot of flexibility and a lot of great deal of use for the track team. There are some conflicts that we need to work around with the fence located here. Again, it gets a little bit pinched, but we're just doing a study right now to figure out which way we want to go, remaining the 6 lanes or adding the 7. To replace the structure, the locker room structure that exists underneath here, we're looking at separating that into either one building located here or 2 buildings, a concession stand and a locker room facility down here. This picture is depicting 2 different buildings, again, locker rooms, toilet rooms here, and the concession area here.
Concession area would have public restroom, right?
That is correct.
Right now, we have no public restrooms, except for porta
Those
johns.
would all be new restrooms inside these facilities. In addition, we're looking at this tennis court area, and whether or not it remains tennis courts or is changed to parking, that remains to be seen, as Dr. Skink has talked about the negotiations with the zoo. We will know, though, regardless of if it's parking, it will be accessed from Rockefeller, and that's what's depicted here. We will be replacing the synthetic turf field, which the carpeting, and then any storm water mitigation that we need to do. We will put that either underneath or, like Jason said, in the corner, try to fit it in the corner on site. And I think that new fencing also around the perimeter, some lighting for whatever is created here and around these buildings.
Can you address the lighting in the event there is a parking lot? That was a concern cited by some of the community. So how do we, if there is a parking lot there, how do we address lighting so that it's illuminated, but yet does not cause any overshadow or reflections on the community?
Sure, absolutely. In fact, we call that night sky, so that's something that we need to avoid as part of just being good stewards of the environment. We would absolutely do that and make sure that it is only for security purposes only, and direct lighting onto the parking lot. And we would do lighting studies to make sure that in fact there would be no bleed onto anything adjacent.
And then the plan is to have fencing go around all of the practice field, the tennis courts or parking lot, all the stadiums, so all that blue fence that most of the residents and the people see now that is all bent, rusted.
That's correct, that would be replaced.
That'll all be replaced. And then we'll put new landscaping around that area, that whole area of the practice fields and either the tennis courts or parking lot. Do we have to add landscaping on the other side where the visitor bleachers are? I do not remember. I think there's some landscaping.
We will do whatever we need to do. Again, those small decisions have not been made at this point, but we will work them out as we move forward.
Now, would there be storage available underneath these stands?
Well, if you do provide storage, the current building code requires you to sprinkle it.
Sprinkle the storage.
Yes, that's correct.
Water it,
That's correct.
our storage space.
Yes,
Oh.
because it's a high hazard area then, because you're having a high occupancy above and a high hazard below. So what they do is they want you to sprinkle it. Also, that's why we're trying to keep these buildings also under a certain square footage so that we don't have to bring out a sprinkler system for them as well. Because if they exceed 7,200 square feet, they will have to be sprinkled.
What about
Wouldn't you like water the sides of the building and the roof?
No, like a sprinkler system, like
Oh.
like that.
sprinkler?
Okay.
Fire sprinkler.
Sorry.
Fire suppression
Fire
system.
suppression
Okay,
system.
I get it.
Sorry.
Under the stadium, I have seen it, some school districts have chain link fence
Mhm.
where they store their hurdles, they can store.
I think any outdoor equipment would be fine that would normally be sitting just next to the bleachers. That is not a high hazard or high flame.
We currently have one of those truck canisters, which they're using as storage, and I have seen some school districts put those type of canisters under their bleachers.
And we'll have to take a look into that and see what the code requirements are on that, but that may be a possibility.
Okay.
What code is it? State code or school?
Well, the school code follows International Building Code.
Okay.
And then along with that, there are different fire codes associated with it, depending on the date.
And how do we know that you're giving us different alternatives that should be weighed? For instance, people are concerned about the footprint. I don't know how much it costs to put a sprinkler system in a building, but, we also know there's gonna be height restriction of some height. I assume we can't build it higher than it is now. I don't know if we could build it as high as it is now.
No, we definitely cannot build it as high as it is now.
But, if we could build it high enough and put the concession and restrooms and locker rooms underneath like they are kind of now,
Mhm.
so we have to throw in a sprinkler system, there's trade-offs on that, right?
Sure, what you have is currently an elevated bleacher. It's
Right.
not ADA compliant.
I understand that.
And so what would be required by that would be a significantly sized ramp
Okay,
or some type of elevator.
right.
And so there are certainly options, in those directions.
But our footprint limits us on behind them, correct?
Yeah. Yes, we are pretty much in a very, going up to a very tight area right to that fence with your neighbors. So we are limited in that, and what the current code and what your bleachers were designed to back several years ago is a much different building code than, well, in fact, it wasn't really a building code at all.
Decades.
So we're gonna have to adhere
War
to
II.
what we're doing. It's certainly possible, and, it's just a matter of, I thought we were, trying to investigate recreating what we had, and also keeping dollars in mind, so, but still obviously
Yeah, but
providing a quality.
my problem is, looking at that drawing, I have no way of knowing what's the difference of what that is or putting it underneath, if it's allowed.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? And the other board members, somebody just asked a question, why didn't you put the locker underneath? Well, now we know we need a sprinkler system, which is gonna add to the cost if we do it. But, again, you wouldn't be taking up as much of, you'd have more green space there too. So, is it a, $500,000 to put it underneath, or does the height restriction prohibit that, or the ADA prohibit it, or something?
We can certainly investigate that for you.
Okay.
And do an option and cost it all out.
And again, I don't wanna spend an extra $50,000 in architect fees just because you have a pie-in-the-sky idea, but seems like getting a basic idea estimate of whether it would be allowed and what the general difference in the price was shouldn't be a extremely taxing
Some of the,
exercise.
sure, I certainly understand that, and we did do initial studies where, taking cross-section through the bleacher structure to understand what kind of usable space would be below it.
Right.
And without elevating it significantly, it is not a usable space.
Okay.
So half of the bleacher would be usable to store underneath it, which is why if you go into the stadium building now, you'll see that the rooms are chamfered and you can actually walk into the ceiling in some sense. It's like the training room, some of the miscellaneous offices and some of the storage areas.
Right.
Anything really flanking the track area.
Okay.
It's also below grade too. The current locker rooms are about 2 or 3 feet below
Okay.
grade, which gives us some of that height in there now.
Exactly.
I don't-
And it's still,
But
would
that
still
makes
be
it
higher
flood a
than
lot,
what
too.
we're talking about.
Right.
So with that quick study, we went in the direction that we would be saving more space by putting it and making it a more efficient layout by moving it out from underneath the bleachers.
Is there any room off of the northeast east corner of the stadium where the current auto shop and garage, is there a way to put a building over there or build off of there for storage so that, I know there's a little bit of green space, not a lot. There's that corner basically where the 6-lane currently is and then turns. I think behind it is the long jump pits, correct?
Mhm. Right.
So there's really not room unless we were able to turn I think way back in the day, I know when I played here, we're going back 20 years now, but I think the garage used to be like the ticket booth and concession stand because there was some running water and sometimes they use that. There's no bathrooms in there right now, but could we possibly tap into the bathrooms in the auto shop or the plumbing from that? I don't know if it's gonna cost, what I'm asking, I guess, basically, is it gonna cost more money to do something like that than to do, eventually, we're gonna have to start getting down to some of these decisions, I think, right?
Right, right. And you're certainly kind of landlocked here, and as far as that garage is concerned, we are already counting on some of that to be used for the storage that we're displacing back here. So a part of that being utilized for some of the storage.
Right now, all the unusable space in the stadium that used to be the old concession area and public restrooms, which were deemed in several years ago that they could not be used, is where we're storing equipment and stuff, correct, Joel?
Yeah, I'd say there's some usable space in there, not all of it, but we do, I think there's about 1,500 square feet.
And that's what we use for storage right now? Some storage?
Yes, some of it.
So we're gonna have to make up some of that somewhere.
Can I change the subject a little bit, or are you
Sure.
done? Regarding the lights, right now there's a problem with, well, there's two things I want to ask. Right now there's a problem with changing the lights. They have to go onto the track and tear up the track with their little tank or whatever they use to get up there. I hate to put in a new track and subject it to that kind of damage. The other point is there new technology so the lights wouldn't have to be as high as they are, so you don't get sort of the light pollution on the neighborhood, and they'd still be effective to illuminate the field?
Well, I don't know the age of the light fixtures that were done.
Well, the poles at least are 40, 30 years old.
Well, certainly there'd be more efficient fixtures, absolutely, that would require less replacement. LED technology.
But what about the effect on the neighborhood?
And again, those would be able to be mitigated.
So right now, you haven't looked into that at all, though?
No, that's not part of the scope of the work currently.
Okay.
If that's something that the district would like to look at, we can. But again, we need to, at some point in time, restrict ourselves to a number that we are looking to hit for a budget, for a construction point for you.
In the original life safety plan, you have the resurfacing of the track. So this current drawing shows the possibility of a 7-lane track and what would have to be addressed.
Yes.
In the borings we ordered, we are getting soil borings from under certain areas of the track to make sure that that subbase and all that is okay.
That's correct.
In the event that, one question I think the board would want to know is that in the event that the soil borings come up and say the subbase and the pitch and those things are a problem with the current track and need to be redone, you know, then it's a matter of, okay, if you're redoing a 6-lane track, I'm using totally ghost numbers, but if this, a 6-lane track would be $500,000, but if you're already doing it and adding a 7th, it's only, you know, 550,000.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's what I think the board's gonna wanna ask is, by to do a 7-lane track, we have to redo the entire track.
That's correct.
But if the soil borings come back that the pitch is wrong and that the soil underneath is wrong, which is why we're having the problems with the track cracking and peeling.
Mm-hmm.
And
we have to replace the track anyway, then the 7-lane wouldn't be that more additional.
Okay. So a lot will depend on what comes back on the soil
Yes.
borings and Jason's study on
Yes.
overall quality of the track? Because right now our track pitches towards the field, correct?
Well, it pitches in a variety of ways, right? Why don't you speak to that?
Sure.
Jason?
Yeah, mainly it pitches in. We have done a little analysis of the rules for track are extremely tight. It's literally 0.1% slope you can have in the longitudinal direction. So as you're running around the perimeter this way, you can only go up 1 inch in 1,000 inches or 1 foot in 1,000 feet. So in this direction, the allowable slopes are very tight. It's almost flat. There are areas that go outside of that, specifically the northeast corner. And I understand why it was done. It's to match the grades that are over in that area. They had to come up here and then, go down just a little bit to the south of that. So now I say they're steep, but I mean you're still talking slopes that are like 1% slope, which you'd still look at. You might think it's flat, like the space inside of a sidewalk. A sidewalk, that cross slope is about 2%. The cross slope that's from side to side, you might not even think there's any pitch to that. So it's not like it's extreme slopes, but doesn't meet the requirements for track.
It does or doesn't?
It does not.
It does not?
meet.
I mean, they redid the thing completely.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
So
This
there's
is
too much
also
of there's
from
too
where-
much there's too much of a pitch, is what you're saying.
too much of a pitch. Yes.
This is also from wear and tear and the
Right.
divots that were created from the imperfections of the surface. This is not, and we're not sure that the base was completed the last time that
Right.
this track was done. So the only way to correct this would be to redo the base.
Doesn't mean that it was designed that way. Could just be it was, design, construction, and time.
Flooding? Flooding?
Flooding.
Because the flooding could deteriorate the subbase.
Well, water gets in there, water freezes, heaves, water softens the underlying soils, things settle. If you have something going up next to something going down, then it's exacerbating.
So the existing pitch, you say, should be like 1%, or whatever you said
Yeah,
it is.
less than that.
Less.
Point
So tracks are basically flat.
Yeah, that's in this direction. As you run around the perimeter, you can have more slope from side to side. And it normally is pitched from the outside edge to the inside edge, like the design, like this one, your current track does. And that can pitch more because you want to get the water off of there. So that's how you're allowed to do that. Shed the water.
You should pitch it towards the field.
That's normal design. That
Okay.
is. It also kind of gives you maybe more of a psychological advantage, but you feel like you're kind of banking the
Okay.
turn when you're going in that direction. Obviously, I'm not much of a track guy.
I'm a track guy, so I know what you're saying. It's worse on an indoor facility.
Yeah.
So obviously the quality of the surface that was used last time was not very good.
Mhm.
Because the pictures in the life safety report and from just when you and Joel and I walked the track, and we're just randomly picking up pieces of asphalt off our track. So that's why when you look at our track, you'll see there's 5 of the 6 lanes are black, and then you'll see patches of gray. It's because the asphalt, coating in asphalt that they put on top of the cement has been, I don't know if they used the right surface or if they used the cheapest surface, but that's all pretty much worn, a lot of it's worn off, and that's why we're having the bad peeling, correct?
You do have a lot of wear and tear on the track surface, correct?
So how do we prevent that even if we just resurface the track?
Well, we need to look at the soil borings and make sure that you have the correct base, that there's no undulations that are happening, no movement, no heaving like Jason talked about. And then if in fact we do get to redo the track, then we would make a positive drainage and make sure that there are no puddling and anything that would erode
And if the
prematurely.
sub-base and the borings come back okay, then are you gonna recommend or give us different
Yeah, we can go
perspectives on
through
different types of surfaces, maybe more of a rubber surface or
Absolutely.
something that would be of higher quality?
There will be a lot of choices in the not-too-distant future
Okay.
for you.
Because the track is used a lot by the community as well.
Yeah, we can certainly look at a variety of products.
Yeah, put a list.
So that's the football stadium and track, the
What's the next picture, Carrie?
drainage we talked about, right?
Or Mary Ann, I'm sorry.
This is really more of a blow-up of that locker room facility. This is the one that incorporates the concession area on one end. So this is just one building as opposed to the two that were depicted before. So this is showing that there's still a training room, there's washrooms for the public and for the team locker rooms, and some shower area, and a coach's office, and of course a mechanical space for the infrastructure that needs to support that new building.
Is that what we have now? Is that just one locker room there?
You have two different locker rooms right now,
Yeah.
and that's
I
what this
can't
would,
see the
I'm
full-
sorry, yeah.
Maybe easier to see on your.
There are two different locker rooms here.
Okay.
This is broken up into a varsity and a freshman soft.
So currently what we do, in the fall, both locker rooms are completely used by the boys soccer team and the boys football team. And then in the springtime, one side is used by the boys track team, and the other side is used by the girls soccer team and girls track team. So what we wanted to set this up is more or less like either call them locker A, locker B, or varsity, junior varsity. But basically, there's unisex restrooms in both of them and a similar amount of locker space in both of them. The varsity locker room looks slightly bigger on the drawing because we'll have to, right now we use 2 lockers per athlete in the fall when they lock up all their equipment. So that's why that locker room might look larger, because they're single tall lockers compared to where the double lockers that we have on the frost soft side. But we have to still go through all that with all of our coaches and athletic director to see if they want a similar setup the way they have it, which is giving each kid 2 locker rooms in the fall, giving each kid 2 lockers in the fall and keep them similar size, or if they would want one tall locker, and also what's more cost efficient.
Carrie, what's the square footage on this?
On the bottom, John.
6,300 square feet.
I'm sorry?
6,300
Oh,
square
okay.
feet.
Okay.
Right there.
How does this compare to what we have now under the stadium?
It's, again, I think you can't compare, it's not really apples to apples, because the spaces that are chamfered are not usable space in my mind, so it is comparable.
I want you to
Usable
say
space.
it's 50% more.
I don't recall, you'll have the.
Yeah, I do. The current occupied space, the non-storage space, is about 4,800.
So about 1,500.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you take the concession stand off it and go to the next drawing, then you're down to 5,600. Is that correct?
Right. If you scroll up a little bit more, Mary Ann, you'll see those with the, yes, that's fine.
That one, Mary Ann, can you scroll down?
This building right here.
You want to be able to see that there's 2 buildings.
So, yeah, just, I think, zoom out a little bit, that should help.
There you go. That's fine. So that concession stand, this would be the separate building if we did one on one side of the bleachers and one on the other.
Correct, so there'd be a small concession stand, washrooms and a storage, and then obviously some mechanical to hold the infrastructure for that facility as well.
And nothing really changed on the other side except you took a set of washrooms off.
We took the concession stand and the set of washrooms off, so basically we detached this from over here. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just a matter of functionality, so what happens when we keep it on this side of the bleacher is that we would kind of create a lot of traffic to a very small area, and we wanted to separate it. I think the benefit of the two different ones would be to separate the traffic flow. students going one way, players going one way, visitors and, participants going the other direction. So,
Is there much difference in cost?
there might be
separating?
a little bit, but it's probably, it's basically one wall and a different mechanical system. The more of the infrastructure, getting the two different waters out to those areas would be the cost. So it's not a huge cost, but there is a little bit more.
Is there a way to put 1,500 square feet on the back of the auto shop for this building?
It's a little tight over there. We could certainly, do a study.
Just to maximize space and tap into plumbing and electric that's already there from the auto shop?
Mhm. We can look at that.
Where would the water now go, where would the water come from now to the proposed new locker room?
Well, right now you have water brought out to the current locker room, so you have a water source right there already.
Where's that from?
I don't know, Jason, do you know
Was
what
it
it's?
put in 2006 or whatever?
No, I think there was water out there long before that.
I'm sure those washroom facilities look pretty old in there, so that's been there for quite some
I
time.
need to look at the pipe.
Well, that could be a problem. That could be all galvanized pipe or,
Absolutely, and that would be something we're gonna bring to your attention as we move forward. A lot of these details will be addressed as we go through schematic design and design development, construction documents.
It doesn't say. I assume it's Washington Avenue. It's my assumption.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
anybody have any other questions on this part? Eric, you go to the next slide.
And then
Okay,
this is-
so we just have these in there just so for the same reason why we have the tennis courts on inside the parking lot. This is just an aerial footage again of where, in the event we have to move the courts off-site, this is where they would go in Veterans Park. And we're doing soil borings there to just make sure, it was only $2,000 or $3,000, and that was better to do it now as one big soil bearing project, correct?
That's correct.
And then the next picture is just our general overhead. So as I updated the board, the easement, Carrie, if you could show them where the easement was denied. So that easement that we requested from the county forest preserve, so that we would just build a smaller parking lot where the current tennis courts exist, was denied. And that it would be paving over forest preserve land, even though all of it is gravel. So I'm hoping in my next meeting, if I can get them out here to show them that, maybe that could bring up a potential. And that it would be privatizing forest preserve land and setting a precedent for some of the other cases. I brought up that, some residents had brought up the golf course and the deal that occurred in Rosemont, and the county's reaction to that is that's why they're being forced to be even more stringent, because those deals were not felt that they were not what their bylaws stand for or what the law stands for. The thing that they brought up and they want to keep talking about is that the original proposal that was suggested from the school district by myself and Mr. Welch a year or two ago, was that gravel lot, and that's outlined in the green. And they currently park staff in the gravel lot in the summer and for special events. And I think the Forest Preserve and Zoo may be looking for an opportunity to improve that so that it is a traditional parking space or a space that can be used year-round. It can be plowed as well as can drain. So one thing that I think that we do bring to the table is we currently are paying, $18,000 this year, is it, Tim, or is it 19 this year?
It would be 19 this year.
So we pay, it goes up $1,000 a year. Every year we rent that shared lot is what we call it. There's one circled in blue. So one thing I'm trying to propose to the county, if they need the money to do those infrastructure improvements, we could possibly do an IGA or intergovernmental agreement. Maybe we could pay our rent up front for 20 or 25 years in return to get year-round access to that lot, or maybe a large easement in that lot, that they would move the gate so that it wouldn't be locked off. Now, I don't know if that would help us with our whole tennis court parking lot problem, but it would bring some type of easement back on the table. So that's kind of what I'm pursuing now with the county, and they have not said no to that at this time. As I said, we have a couple meetings set up in the next week or so. But so some of the proposals that we originally offered that we were told no on now seem to have come back on the table, and I don't know if that's maybe the possibility that I mentioned, we might be able to front some of our rent. And we would offset fronting some of that rent by if we had the we right now have about 65 students on a waiting list for parking permits, so if we had a smaller parking lot somewhere on the west side of Gulf Road that we could have an additional 65 or 60 spots, we could sell those to students during the school year and use that to offset the cost of the rent that we would be paying up front to the zoo to help them pave their gravel lot to help us pick up some additional parking. So there's some cost, not necessarily cost neutral, but definitely we can make up our cost if we were able to come up with some type of arrangement with the zoo and with the forest preserve. But all that still is to be determined.
Kevin, as part of that, in terms of paying for who paves that gravel lot, would we pay for that too?
We're going to get into some more detailed conversations with the head people at the Forest Preserve and at the zoo. I don't think we would pay to pay for that. What I would recommend that the board consider is possibly, let's just say for easy math, we pay $20,000 a year for our parking. If we did a 20-year intergovernmental agreement and we gave them the $400,000 up front, that's $400,000 that they could use towards whatever it costs to pave that with their staff or engineer, you know what I'm saying?
I see.
And that's an incentive for them to make an infrastructure improvement and not tap into their budget, but in return by giving us some parking or reworking how we're using their parking.
We'd expect them to be more flexible in their use of the parking than what we see. I mean, again, we gotta be careful. It's their lot and everything, but we've had many discussions about how the lot's locked in the fall on a Saturday morning when it's raining and, you know, there's a basketball tournament, people can't park in the lot.
Right.
And no one's parking.
They're never gonna fill their own.
Yeah,
their other
I
lots
said
there.
that the board would be hesitant to do any kind of, I think they're pretty clear, Carrie and Joel attended that meeting with me, that the board's willing to work and come up with some creative ways to help them meet their needs. But they're gonna have, they wouldn't tolerate doing a upfront loan payment or a rent payment and seeing the gate locked. So we would have to get the gate moved or do some of those things. I think right now it's premature to talk about it,
Right.
except for let the public know that we have not forfeited anything and we're pursuing it and we're going. Commissioner Tobolsky's back involved and he's trying to help us to work out something, which I think he helped talk to the Forest Preserve to say, hey, there's an opportunity to make an infrastructure improvement to Forest Preserve land that the zoo uses. So I'm hoping that there's some possibility there. But I did make it clear that the school district can't have the gate be locked if we're going to be doing these kind of things. Or we need, and that's why we originally went after some type of easement so that we could do a smaller lot on the West Gulf roadside and still have some guaranteed visitor and handicap parking on the east side, so that when they are having a busy day at the zoo, we can still hold school events, still have community using the facility through their rentals and those types of things. So I'll be able to report out more to the board hopefully by the end of the month of September.
Is there anything else you want to cover in this section on the presentation, Carrie?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I think the one thing, if you could maybe restate in kind of closing, because I know it's a major concern of our neighbors, to the extent we cover any green space or whatever else we do with drainage, the ordinance would require us to, as you said earlier, control the water and not allow water runoff from any paved area or building we put to increase the flow onto any of our neighbors, right?
Yes.
So I mean, there's several of the ordinance protect against that, right?
State law.
State law.
State
So,
drainage law.
so part of your design, no matter what we come up with, will have to deal with if we cover more green space to capture the water during the storm so it doesn't run off into the neighbors, right?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.